Republic Square, the heart, the center of the city of Yerevan. A very interesting situation geopolitically here in Armenia these days. It's a very tricky situation, just like it is for the other countries here in the South Caucasus. Welcome everyone to Yerevan, Armenia. That's right. We are here in Yerevan for our first official video from here. We had a little bit of a look at Yerevan in our last video from our long sleeper train, overnight train trip from Batumi, Georgia to here in Yerevan. But really all we saw was like a train station and a mall, which was nice, I guess. But here we are in beautiful Republic Square. Republic Square, the heart, the center of the city of Yerevan, Armenia. Beautiful, beautiful square. And today we're going to walk around the square a little bit, talk about some of the interesting buildings that are here on the square, maybe some ideas for some future videos, and also some very interesting events that took place just recently here in Republic Square in Yerevan that were very historic in themselves. So, come along. Thanks for clicking on the video. If you want to help out the channel and help it grow, I really would appreciate it. Click on the like button down there, the subscribe button, and the little bell next to it to be notified for when new videos drop. It really helps the channel grow because it's going to help the YouTube algorithm recognize this content and spread it to other YouTube viewers. If you'd like to support the channel monetarily, I would appreciate that as well. You can leave a super thanks by clicking this thanks button here and give a small donation to the channel. I appreciate your support. So back to the video, enjoy. So here on Republic Square, it is very hot. Man, it's I've been looking at the weather. The weather reports for Yerevan here in the summer, very, very hot. It's gonna be like 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 36, 37 degrees Celsius. It's gonna be hot. Luckily, here in Yerevan, it is not very humid. It's kind of a dry, arid, semi-arid climate. So we should be okay with the weather, I think. But here on Republic Square, some really beautiful buildings. Republic Square is really, really beautiful. There's this center like oval part here with the streets going through, and some of these beautiful buildings, which we'll get to in a second. But then over here, there are these like parks, these long parks that continue down in between the boulevard over here. And then further down that way, there's like even more parks, sort of like the green part of the square. And this right here, a very famous building. This is the National Gallery and National History Museum of Armenia. And I think at some point we're going to be going to this to make a video, because I really do want to see the National History Museum part of the museum here. This over here is the like national government building of Armenia, because we are of course in the capital. And matching it over here is the main post office for Yerevan. What's really cool about Republic Square is all of the buildings that are on it were built roughly around the same time. And so they all sort of match up. The faces have these like curved faces with the curved, I guess like windows, the windows that are curved at the top. The architecture matches, which is really, really cool. A little bit of the history of Republic Square itself. It was designed by a designer named Alexander Tamanian. Alexander Tamanian, back in 1925, 1926? Back then, way back. The square was originally designed and the buildings themselves are newer. They were finished in like the 1950s. These four buildings rather. These two buildings over here are like commercial buildings. There's a hotel over there, that's a Marriott hotel, and this is basically like a shopping building with lots of shops down on the first floor. Of course, here, like we mentioned, is the post office, the main post office building, and the building with the clock tower here is the main government building. These buildings were built in like the 1950s, and the museum, National Gallery and History Museum, this building was finished in 1977. It opened. So even though the architecture looks like pretty old, it looks like classical architecture, it's actually pretty new. It's 20th century. It's all 20th century architecture. So the square here completed in the way you see it now, at least, in 1977. And that, of course, was at the time when Armenia was a Soviet republic under the rule of the Soviet Union. And Armenia, like I mentioned, has a very, very long history. It's a lot like Georgia in that way, where we were previously before this, in that the history goes back way, way, way back. And there have been many, because of the strategic importance of the location here of Armenia in the South Caucasus, there have been many, many empires that have rolled through here and seen this very strategic spot and liked what they've seen and taken over. So Armenia has been under the rule of many, many empires over thousands of years. But now, of course, Armenia is an independent country, an independent republic, and very interesting, a very interesting situation geopolitically here in Armenia these days. A very rapidly developing situation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think I want to do that from over here in the park, where we can at least get a little bit of shade, because it is really, really hot out here. So let's go across the street. We'll head over to the park, talk a little bit more about Armenian history, the history of Republic Square, and sort of the modern situation of Armenia. Over here in the park across from the square, and beautiful park. Like I said, it extends all the way down. It has these fountains. There's lots of seating for the little cafes and restaurants and like drink stands and things that are around here. It's a beautiful park. It's a long row of fountains that run down the middle. Lots of seating with shade where you can sit and enjoy a snack, a meal, something to drink, especially on a hot day like this. And I said once we got over here, we talk a little bit more about the history of Republic Square. Now, it wasn't always named Republic Square. In fact, during the time of the Soviet Union here, when Armenia was a Soviet republic, it was named Lenin Square. And actually, like right over where we were, out in front of the National Gallery and History Museum, there was actually a big statue of Vladimir Lenin that was like 20 feet tall. And that statue was there for quite some time, like 50 years, until the Armenian independence and the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. When Armenia became independent, the statue was taken down. There's actually like pictures of it being taken down. Pretty famous event here in Armenia. And the Lenin statue was actually put on like the back of a truck afterwards and driven around the square, around like the roundabout there, with huge crowds, and like a lot of crowds out there cheering, some of them throwing like pebbles and coins and stuff at the statue as it went by. And the statue, for a long time after that, for like almost 30 years, was just sort of laying in a yard, like behind the museum building. And I think I've seen some videos where people have tried to find the statue and see like if they could like see the Lenin statue. But apparently, I think pretty recently, within the last couple of years. It has been moved out of there, and at this point I've done some research into it, and I can't really tell exactly what happened to the statue or where it ended up. Because of course, if it was still there, I would love to go see it, but it is not. It's no longer there. Now, I also mentioned that there was some very recent events in Armenian history that happened over in Republic Square. And as we walk around the really beautiful neighborhood here around Republic Square in the sort of center of Yerevan, we can talk about that. Now, Republic Square, of course, they would have events there during the Soviet Union, you know, Victory Day Parade, and different like International Workers' Day on May 1st. They would have big festivals and parades and stuff in there, military parades, all kinds of stuff, just like they did in pretty much all the Soviet republics. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, when independent Armenia was sort of growing as an independent nation, Armenia faced, and today still faces, a lot of the same problems that a lot of the former Soviet republics face, with political corruption and things like that. Over here at the other end of the park, there's like a statue here. I don't know exactly who this statue is of. It's interesting. I'll find out who this is and I'll put it in the subtitle. But like I said, Armenia has faced some problems with political corruption, and there's an interesting story that takes place culminating in 2018, but starting way back in like the mid 2000s, and it has to do with actually the current Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and a former Prime Minister Serge Sargsyan. Now, Serge Sargsyan was in the early 2000s. He was a member of the government. I think he was actually like a Minister of Defense here, and he's a member of the Republican Party. He's actually was the chairman at the time of the Republican Party, which is like one of the parties, the political parties here in Armenia. And he was elected Prime Minister in 2007. He served as Prime Minister for 1 year, from 2007 to 2008. After that, he was elected President of Armenia. Now, Armenia, like Georgia before, we mentioned this in one of our videos about Georgia, our Georgian Independence Day video, link in the description. But the political system is a parliamentary system here in Armenia, so the Prime Minister has like significant amount of power. The president, it's not like the President of the United States. It's a different political system, so just know that. But he was elected president after being prime minister for 1 year. He served 2 terms as president, actually, from 2008 to 2013, and then again from 2013 up to like 2017. And actually, during his second term as president, he supported an amendment to the Constitution that would allow people to be elected. It would basically allow him to be elected to be prime minister again after his term as president was over, which he swore that he would not actually do. We can walk over here as we continue to talk into English Park, which is a park that is right near Republic Square. But Sargsyan swore that he would not be prime minister again, right? Like, he just supported an amendment to the Constitution that would allow him to be prime minister again, and swore that he would not. So, of course, in 2018, he became prime minister again. He got elected prime minister, and he accepted. And he became prime minister. And people here in Armenia were not very happy about that. There was a huge protest out in Republic Square over there. Hundreds of thousands of people came out to protest Sargsyan's election to being prime minister. And the protests were led by Sargsyan's opponent, Nikol Pashinyan. Now, if you're familiar with current Armenian politics, you'll know that Nikol Pashinyan is the current prime minister. And he's been prime minister since 2018. Now, how, of course, did he become prime minister? Well, that has to do with what is known as the Velvet Revolution here in 2018 in Yerevan. After the protests, Pashinyan was actually arrested, and he was held like in jail for basically like leading the protests, right? And that, of course, that double down led to even more massive protests out in Republic Square. Like literally hundreds of thousands of people. Imagine Republic Square where we just were, but with all the traffic shut down and completely full to the brim with people screaming and chanting and protesting against the Republican Party and the Republican government here in Armenia, in Yerevan. And it didn't take long, actually, from I think like 1 or 2 days, Pashinyan was in jail before the government conceded to the protesters, and Serge Sargsyan he made a speech in which he admitted that he was wrong, he apologized, and he conceded the election over to Nikol Pashinyan. And Pashinyan became prime minister. And he's been prime minister, like I said, ever since. And what's interesting, I think, about Pashinyan and about his, the current situation here in Armenia, political situation, which we'll talk about for sure, is even though Pashinyan was quite popular at the time that he was put into power, recently there was a survey, and he has a 13% approval rating now, and the majority of Armenian citizens still view political corruption as a huge problem here in the country, and so they still have a lot of work to do, ways to go with dealing with political corruption. But it is a tricky situation that they are in geopolitically here in Armenia, just like Georgia. Also a very tricky political situation, which we talked about in some of the previous videos. But here in the South Caucasus, the 3 countries the South that make up the South Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, in a very tricky political situation. They are, like I said, historically have been ruled by many different empires. Ottoman Turks, the Russian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire. So they have a lot of, because they're in a very strategically important place on the globe, there's a lot of influences from other countries on politics here in Armenia. Most notably in Armenia, Russia and Turkey. Those 2 countries, of course, Turkey is Armenia's neighbor to the west, and Russia is just a hop, skip, and a jump to the north across Georgia. And for a long time, Russia has actually been a very, very important security guarantor to Armenia. And Armenia has very, very close diplomatic, political ties to Russia, and has had very close ties to Russia ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. So it is quite an interesting situation now in Armenia, because since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, Armenia has started to distance itself in a lot of ways from Russia. There has been an ongoing conflict between Armenia here and its neighbor Azerbaijan over a disputed region of territory called Nagorno-Karabakh. You may be familiar with it, you may not be familiar with it, but regardless, Russia has always sort of been the country that settles the conflict when it gets hot and it starts to heat up. And a lot of the times they have been a security guarantor for Armenia. Armenia, up until very recently, was part of the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is sort of like It's been referred to as like Russia's NATO. It's a group of countries that that have aligned with Russia in a security organization to sort of guarantee each other's security. And like I said, up until recently, very recently, Armenia was part of that organization, but they left. They left the CSTO. Technically, they're still part of the CSTO, but in 2024, they stopped all financing to the CSTO and formally announced that they're planning to leave the organization. Because in 2023, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict flared up again. Armenia reached out to Russia for help, and Russia was not able or not willing to send any peacekeepers to deal with the situation because, Russia was neck deep in their war with Ukraine. And that was a real stinging blow to the government here in Armenia and the people of Armenia, especially because Nikol Pashinyan, the prime minister, is sort of a more, like, his policies and his political leanings are leaning more towards Europe, and he has been moving Armenia slowly more and more towards Europe, more and more towards the United States, towards the collective West, as it's referred to in geopolitics. And after 2023, when Russia didn't send any peacekeepers, that was sort of the end of it for Armenia. And actually, it was a delegation from the United States that ultimately negotiated the ceasefire between Azerbaijan and Armenia in 2023. So now it's a very interesting situation here for Armenia because Russia still wants to have influence here in the South Caucasus. They have, there is, like I mentioned in our videos in Georgia, the Georgian Dream Party that controls the government there in Georgia is seen as like a pro-Russian party, almost as like an entity of Russian influence in the South Caucasus. And in Armenia here, there is actually a Russian military base that still exists here. So there are Russian troops on Armenian soil, and just very, very recently, with the outbreak of sort of a rising tension and conflict between Azerbaijan and Russia, which we won't get into, but it's been happening very recently, and it's a very fast-moving situation. Russia has actually moved more troops down to their military base here in Armenia, more than normal. So it's a very tricky situation, just like it is for the other countries here in the South Caucasus, of being sort of sandwiched in between much more powerful, militarily powerful and economically powerful countries like Turkey, Russia, and Iran also to a certain extent. And that's exactly what they have to deal with here in Armenia, politically speaking. And that's what Nikol Pashinyan is dealing with here in Armenia, politically speaking. But that's just a little glimpse into the history of Republic Square and the more modern history and current situation here in Armenia. Now, we're going to be here in Yerevan for a little bit, and we definitely want to see some other stuff. Like I said, I definitely want to go in and see the History Museum over there on Republic Square. And there's a lot of other really cool stuff to see here in Yerevan. A lot of very interesting parks and museums, monuments that have very interesting histories. There's one very unique monument. I won't spoil it, but we're definitely going to go see it here in Yerevan. And other things too around the city we're definitely going to check out. So I think that'll be it for this video. Our first video here in Yerevan, our little introduction to the city of Yerevan. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it. And even though it is blisteringly hot out here today in Yerevan, I think it's going to be that way the whole time we're here. So we better get used to it. But nonetheless, that's going to be it for this video. Stay tuned. There's plenty more coming from here in Yerevan, and we will see you in the next one.